Thank you, Sarah, for being with us. This is the Emerging Podcast, where we talk about emerging tech, emerging careers, and emerging people. Our guest today is Sara El-Hanfy, if I can pronounce that correctly. So a bit about Sarah. After finishing a computer science degree at Swansea University, she worked in the third sector across 2 charities for a couple of years. She then became a UX developer before gradually moving into the AI space. Now she is the head of AI and machine learning at InnovateUK. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, and she advises the UK Parliament on AI. And she also volunteers as a STEM ambassador. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Is there anything that we missed in the intro? Anything else you'd like to mention?
No, I think that gives a good starting point.
Lovely. So let's kind of dive into your kind of early career transition. So you studied computer science at Swansea, and then you decided to work in the third sector. What prompted that that move, and how did you get into your first role?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it sound like there was maybe more of a plan than there was. I left university, and I guess like a lot of people, I was at a point where I needed money. So I started just, applying for jobs in related to the degree that I'd done. So obviously I did computer science, but just kind of general computer science without like a specialism in a specific area. But I think, really kind of how I've approached most job selection processes and job choices is around kind of just using my gut and kind of trying to pick roles that excite me and align to my values. And really that has worked out so far. So yeah, when I came out of uni, I saw some jobs in the charity sector. So I worked for the World Society for the Protection of Animals and Save the Children UK. And so, yeah, it was really about kind of how I could utilise my skills, but also how I could work for either causes or later on technologies that I was passionate about and yeah, really that kind of fit with my values. So I think that's worked out as a strategy. I mean, it's not a strategy as such, but it's worked quite well for me. And I think, if you can find, you spend so much of your time at work. So if you can find that sweet spot where, it's things that excite you and also you do feel passionate about, then that's the ideal, really, isn't it? That's what everyone wants in a job.
Absolutely. It seems like you had a good understanding of your passions and what you wanted to impact, I suppose. Did you have a good understanding of your skill set and how that would help you find a career?
Well, I think they've evolved. I think when I came out of university, I probably understood more like the tangible skills, like your technical skills, than I did some of the more softer skills. And I think likewise with the values, I understood areas that I was passionate about, but I don't think I really maybe understood the broader picture of, actually what's the value that I bring to an organization. I think that's only come as I've got much older and had, more roles in my career, have I actually taken the time to think about my values more in a more structured way, to actually say, okay, actually what matters to me in a job, and also really think about the value that I bring. Because I think sometimes when you're good at things or those softer skills, it's very easy to assume, well, everyone's good at that. But actually, they're the things that I think not everyone is good at that. And because you find it easy, you dismiss it and you think, oh, well, that's nothing. So those things I think are really powerful. And I think it's only as I've kind of gone through my career and maybe got a bit more confident to say, well, actually, that I am really good at that. And not everyone's really good at that. I've got to that point where actually I think, now when I'm looking for jobs, it's kind of like, not that I'm looking at the minute, but now, I can say kind of, yeah, that job, that fits me. And actually it's almost you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. But I think, maybe when I was younger, I didn't have the confidence or the time and space to really do that thinking.
Definitely. And then you decided to move into the private sector and you worked at an organization called Volume as a UX developer.
Yeah.
Did you have some experience with UX before, or what kind of prompted that?
I mean, so when I was in the charity sector, I was working in roles at the time. They were called like e-communications officer role. It feels quite dated now, but it was very much about managing their online strategy and their online presence. So a lot of it was kind of sort of coming up with what we needed to do and overseeing some of those sort of like, I guess, agency relationships and steering. But there was some hands-on on stuff. I guess when I moved, I wanted to be more hands-on and technical again, because I felt like actually I'd almost moved a little bit away from that side of my degree, and it would really benefit me if I was kind of actually sort of keeping at the coalface and enhancing my skills in a kind of a commercial environment. So yeah, so I'd moved. So I was living in London. I'd moved out of London. So it was prompted by kind of what was available in the sort of the local area to me. And Volume it started life as a B2B marketing agency, but evolved into developed a lot of bespoke tech for big corporates. So people at Liberty Global, Virgin Media Business, BP Castrol. So I was working there doing the development, but actually, again, sort of, it is that natural evolution of, I think, when you're in a role, if opportunities present themselves, and I was fortunate enough that in my time at Volume, opportunities did present themselves for me to move into roles that were managing developers and in the team and managing the workload, but also then moving across into the consultancy. So actually that kind of then sort of felt like more of a sweet spot. So in some ways, I guess it was going back a little bit to what I was doing in the charity sector. But actually, I think because it was more on the consultancy side, it was able for me to use my kind of technical knowledge, but also use those kind of soft skills. I mean, my background, I wasn't going to do a computer science degree when initially I was going to do history degree. And so I hadn't taken Maths A level. I therefore kind of had to kind of pick and choose which universities, because some universities filled it at the time anyway. I don't know if the situation changed. Felt like you had to do Maths A level to do a computer science degree, but some didn't, and some really high and important or strong performing universities like Durham University, for example, didn't feel like they needed you to do a Maths A level. So I'd done a flip, but I've always kind of enjoyed that sort of the humanities and the arts, and to this day kind of do performing in my spare time and do musical theatre. So it felt for me like a really good sweet spot of the kind of the sort of the performing and the arts and the humanities, and also the kind of the technical side of things, which I really enjoy.
That's really interesting. And then within Volume, you transitioned towards working exclusively on AI. Can you name what was the most interesting project that you worked on?
Oh, so this is going back a few years now. I'm trying to think of what was probably. I mean, I did a lot of. I think when I started doing that, we were probably at that point where AI was starting to pick up again. It was a bit early, so a lot of the work I did was really around kind of running workshops with a lot of companies on actually what AI can do. And some of those, so there were some interesting like strategic projects I worked on, actually companies that are a bit further along on their journey working on the strategy. But I think some of the most interesting things were more just those general kind of actually helping people understand what AI can do. That was a real sweet spot for me, because it's, I think, I mean, even now we see that there are organizations that I think, particularly at C-level, there's not that real understanding of what AI can do for them, and they see things in the media and actually it doesn't translate to how that's going to be beneficial to their business. And so actually getting groups of sort of senior stakeholders together and being able to take them from the kind of what they see in the media or what they might imagine from films to the kind of the real level projects and applications that clients, that we've helped clients with, and things that are tangible and can benefit their business. I mean, that was amazing, and it was, that was really I got a lot of satisfaction out of that.
So you already had a bit of experience teaching people about AI, and then InnovateUK. How did that opportunity come about, and what did InnovateUK, the AI side, look like when you joined?
So when I moved to InnovateUK, I was looking for a new opportunity, but I think I was just keeping my eyes open to sort of what was around. And to be honest, I wasn't aware of InnovateUK before I moved to the organisation. Although Volume did do R&D and claimed R&D tax credits, it wasn't something we'd ever engaged with as an organisation when I was there. So InnovateUK was quite new to me, but again, it sounded like a really exciting opportunity because you would be seeing what was going on in AI at such a macro level. Whereas it's great working in a company. You get to solve the problems and you get to really reap the rewards. So when you're working on a project, you see it through to the end. You see what the outcomes of. Whereas this is obviously it's very different in that it's the macro level of what lots of different organisations are doing in the UK. So I sit in a very cross economy position, so I don't look after a specific sector. So within my portfolio and my team's portfolio, we have AI projects that they can be in real estate, or they can be in manufacturing, or they can be in a number of different sectors, or they can be some of the more like deep tech sort of fundamentals, obviously not too early stage, because we tend to fund sort of later technology readiness levels, but certainly kind of looking at things like like maybe it's like video compression or some of those sorts of areas. So it's in that respect, it's fascinating because you see such a breadth of AI. So it was that opportunity really to get to see what was going on across the UK and to be part of, I guess, representing the UK and understanding, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and hopefully being part of the solution, by informing policy or designing competitions for those companies. Again, seemed a really exciting opportunity. And I mean, I'm still here sort of 5 years later, so it has been a really exciting opportunity because you get no day is the same, and you get to see work with some really fascinating entrepreneurs and innovators. So it's brilliant.
Nice. And what, I guess, from being someone that's coming from a technical background, how did you approach, what did you have to learn, or what skills did you have to develop to now transition from being this individual contributor that's working on AI project, already being a consultant where you could get to think about things critically and look at maybe a higher level? Now you're at the macro level. What did you have to learn, and what did you have to teach to other people that were working with you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of transferable skills, if I'm honest, because in some ways we're trying to understand the challenges of the sector. So a lot of it is kind of consultations, speaking to companies who are on the ground and who are, they're the ones that are facing the challenges. And so being able to hold workshops, publish surveys, get that data in, and you speak to people and understand what their challenges are, is quite similar to what you would do in consultancy. And then it's about designing what the solution is to that problem. So again, that for me is quite similar. And also there's almost like the equivalent biz dev piece, because often we have to make the case to get funding to run the programs that we want to do, that we think will be beneficial to the sector and to the companies that we're trying to support. So for me, there's actually lots of I guess equivalents to that consultancy role. I think the biggest things you have to learn is obviously the private sector and the public sector. They do have different ways of working. We're funded by the taxpayer, so it's taxpayer money. So obviously the sort of the bureaucracy has to be increased, because we have to make sure that what we're doing, we're not funding things. It's not like I can just say, oh, I think that's a good idea, I want to fund it. There has to be that level of due diligence to make sure that that's the right way of spending taxpayer money. So I think there's that element of kind of process is that in itself is a learning curve, and some of the sorts of strategic cases and economic cases, that for me was probably the biggest learning curve, kind of like understanding how the sort of the government machine works and all the sort of different organizations that operate around the civil service. I thought I had quite a good grasp of government and civil service before I came into InnovateUK, and then I realised quite quickly that wasn't really the case, and actually it takes a little bit of time to get up to speed, I think, with some of those areas.
Right now, we can see how, like you said, there's a disconnect with C-levels execs that are trying to adopt data science into their businesses. They don't really understand it. Now I'm picturing 5 years ago in government trying to help in AI. The gap of knowledge was probably even bigger than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still work to do. There's still work to do in the private sector. There's still work to do in the public sector. I mean, the private sector is a big focus for us. So we know that, you know, there are big corporations adopting lots of AI, but we know that the pace and scale of adoption of AI in the UK isn't really where it needs to be if we want to reap the kind of the economic and societal benefits that are going to bring all the benefits that we hear about regularly. Where, you know, if you're day to day in AI like I am, there's all these figures touted around about the economic benefits or the societal benefits that AI will bring. But unless we're actually adopting that technology in this country, we've got lots of people developing it. You know, we've got great innovators, a world-class research base. But if that's only getting adopted overseas, the benefits won't be felt by the UK society. So we really need to be adopting, you know, the current state of the art at pace and scale, to get some of those businesses, you know, to get their digital levels up so they can adopt these technologies and get them into a place where they can. So then, as you know, as the more cutting edge technologies come along, because, you know, AI is evolving quickly and there's still technical advances that we do need, when that stuff comes along, we'll be in a better position to absorb it and actually reap the benefits of it. So I think, yeah, I mean, there's definitely the private sector, is an area that we're focusing on. So we're going to be launching a program specifically looking at the adoption of AI into low AI maturity sectors, but those that have kind of high growth potential for the UK. But I think the public sector as well, that, you know, there's definitely likewise ways that we can improve services and you know, and increase the productivity and the efficiency of those services for the UK population.
Yeah, it makes sense. What's, I guess now in 2023, what is at the top of your mind these days?
So I guess in a work capacity, the adoption program is a big focus for us. But I think more broadly, and things that do feed into that, I think a lot about kind of, you know, how we make sure AI works for everyone. And I think, you know, there's a number of different facets for that. Everything from making sure that actually the people who are involved in AI, so either that's from a technical perspective, so, you know, coming up and studying computer science or related disciplines, is more diverse. But also bringing in different disciplines. I think for a long time we've sort of focused on, like, you know, it's people who have technical backgrounds, they're the ones that are designing and developing and deploying AI. But actually, I think AI sits in that real, it is that spot that it really needs more diversity of thought. So we need arts and humanities, we need social sciences involved in, you know, actually how do these tools get adopted into companies, and how can we improve that and remove the barriers to adoption. But also with the, you know, the ethical considerations, that's where our arts and humanities colleagues and social sciences can really help as well. But also because it concerns specific topics, you know, we need those subject matter experts understanding, not necessarily to be a developer or, you know, data scientist, but to understand enough that actually we can bring parties together, because rarely do you have someone who's an expert in, I don't know, Earth observation and someone who's an expert in AI or whatever disciplines it is. Actually, we need to bring more disciplines together and more different sectors, I think, together. So I think how we do more of that connectivity and more of increasing the diversity in AI development and just generally raising awareness of AI, I think, is something that is, I guess, front and center of my mind quite a lot of the time.
That's very interesting. We work with quite a few universities and university students, and we basically, one of the things we're doing is building a community of people that are interested to get into AI and data science. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean students on computer science degrees. It can be from a range of different backgrounds, like obviously mathematics, physics, but it can also be degrees that have some kind of numerical component to them. So these can be psychology, geography, physical geography, and then kind of the list goes on and on. So I think creating awareness of the opportunities, and there's a growing list of opportunities in industry, is very important to get more people to understand that even if you have a different background, that doesn't mean that you're disqualified or that you're less qualified, less capable. It means that you bring something else to the table, and there's a space for you.
Absolutely. And I think people who haven't studied like a technical discipline or degree and want to get into the data science, the government have funded AI and data conversion courses, which is very much designed for people who haven't, that's not their background. They've studied a different discipline and they want to do a master's to come across. So I think there's routes for people who, maybe become interested in AI, like I did. I mean, obviously I did it before my degree, but, have been on a different path and then think, oh, actually, that's more my interest area and want to kind of pivot. But like you say, I think there is a need to create space for people who haven't done those areas, but there's still value in bringing them to the table and helping kind of design the solutions and making sure that actually things are going to be used by the public. And I think that's where there's the other big need, is actually just raising the general public awareness of what AI is capable of. Again, it's not in making everyone data science or making everyone developers, but it's just about that, challenging that narrative that we see in the media of what AI is, and also what the future with AI is going to be like. Because I think ultimately these are technologies, people are designing them, people are deploying them, and the more we talk about what they are capable of and what we want to, how we want to see them used in society and what we want society to be like, I think that only helps create the right environment so that innovators can design things that are going to be adopted and do benefit society, because we're having those conversations. It's not just siloed off with developers talking about what they'd like to see and trying to sort of, because personally I don't believe developers are they're trying to cause harm, or they're trying to develop solutions, but you only know what you know. And if the people that are developing it and the people that are working on those solutions are only from certain economic backgrounds or cultural backgrounds, then you can only design for what you know. So actually, the more we're having those conversations, I think that can only improve the output and subsequently the adoption of these technologies.
100% true. That's very interesting. And in addition to the inherent bias that might go into the development of a specific technology, there's also a level of, you can't really control what people are going to do with something once you've built it. So for example, with ChatGPT, I'm sure you're familiar with it. There's been an increase in reports of misuse, in the sense that people are asking ChatGPT how to create malware that specifically target a specific group of people or have a specific kind of functionality. And the creators of OpenAI they could imagine that this would happen, but once you release it in the public, there's only so much you can do to prevent it. So, well, that leads me to a question, because I assume that from your perspective, you look at the adoption of AI from multiple points of view, and one of them is obviously risk. And the question I have is about, how do you create programs that are specifically targeting and looking at the risks of AI, or are these is a risk factor embedded in each of the programs that you create?
So at InnovateUK, I mean, I don't know if it's worth me maybe giving a little bit of an overview into InnovateUK, or whether that's kind of part of the, okay. So I guess InnovateUK is the UK's innovation agency. So we're part of a larger organisation called UK Research and Innovation, which brings us together with 7 research councils and Research England. So the research councils are obviously dealing more with that kind of more fundamental research that comes out of academia and in a number of different areas. So be that engineering and physical sciences or social sciences, whereas Innovate UK is very much focused on supporting business-led innovation. So our role is, or we like to use the phrase, inspire, involve, invest. So that's everything from, the thought leadership. So putting strategies out there of, what we think, how we think things might evolve in certain sectors or technology areas. It's also some of the sort of non-financial support, so support to businesses to help them grow, but also the financial support. So obviously that that's where your questions around some of the probably the more financial interventions that we do. So we run competitions, either it's everything from grant funding to loans, and those competitions have eligibility criteria, they have scope criteria, and so we do have an option to incentivize certain behaviors in those competitions. I think we run a variety of competitions. So we run a competition called Smart, which is a very open and catch-all competition. Now, obviously, we don't want to fund anything that is obviously doing harm. So we have a robust assessment process. So applications come in. If they're eligible for a competition, they go to an assessment process, and then they're judged on a number of things. Nowadays, we ask them about their kind of equality, diversity, and inclusion. We ask them their routes to market. We ask them, to try and get kind of like the sort of the likely economic growth that's going to come off the back of that, and they're assessed on a number of different factors. But so some of the competitions are very broad in their scope. So they might have different specific requirements to other competitions. So, for example, I'm currently involved in a competition that we're running, which is about developing tooling to, I guess, reduce the bottlenecks for AI development. So, things like in the data pre-processing phase. But we're very much looking at tooling that will demonstratively lead to responsible AI and trustworthy AI. So for us, obviously, we're putting that more front and center. So there's certainly ways that we can incentivize, and we do incentivize behaviors through our competition. But I think the flip side of that coin is then also the kind of the regulation that comes out of government. I think because, like you say, I think there's an education piece for some organizations because of actually how you approach the AI ethics conversation and how you work through that process. And there's been some really positive, I think, steps. So organizations like the Digital Catapult with their machine intelligence garage have produced quite robust frameworks, which it's just questions that companies can iterate through. So to get you thinking about the right questions as you're going through that development. But like you say, there's no guarantee that you can think of every scenario. Once you put a tool into the wild and it gets used, it might get used in a way that you can't see. And that's where I think the government's regulations and the policies on AI moving forward become increasingly important. So it's kind of increasing the awareness and education of, I think, those people developing the AI solutions to try and incentivize that behavior. So, you're considering security, you're considering ethics up front. But then also having the catches and the guardrails. So, if things aren't going to plan, that we've got the regulation that can then deal with the consequences.
So I suppose from your perspective, what's holding back the adoption of AI in the UK? And the UK is a leader amongst most countries, but what do you think are the institutional barriers or any other kind of barriers that are holding back?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of different things, really. I think, skills is a big area. So I think, as we've already kind of touched on, I think both the sort of the skills within adopting organizations, maybe, there's awareness and there's understanding that needs to be built up. First, to make the case, so to demonstrate, what's the ROI of AI, why should we be investing in it, and making sure that case is strong. But also, I think in some of the skills of, the people who are going to be working alongside those tools or are the ones that have to operationalize and scale the tools. Then I think there's information asymmetry is it's a phrase we use quite a lot in civil service when we're making our business cases. But I think there's a disconnect between what adopters know, what developers know, what investors know, and actually we need to kind of start bringing more of adopters and developers together, so they're actually understanding, from an adopter point of view, they understand what they need to do to adopt AI within their organization, and they're connected to the developers that can do that for them. But also from a development point of view, I think it's important to understand actually what are the genuine market challenges that those organizations are facing. And I think that's certainly one of the things we're seeing with the program that we're looking to run, because it's looking at low AI maturity sectors. I think there are some sectors of the UK that are much better understood. So finance, health, I think we see AI developers gravitate to those sectors more because they understand the challenges. Whereas some sectors, they've got challenges in that they may be less far along their digital transformation journey, but also I think it's developers maybe don't understand the challenges that AI could be used to address, and where like some of that low-hanging fruit is, and so therefore those sectors get a little bit neglected. And I think similarly with investment gravitates towards those sectors where the return on investment is really well understood, understandably. But if we can do a bit more of that connectivity and almost helping to address those information asymmetries, that as well will be important for kind of just making sure that all sectors and all regions of the UK benefit from AI, rather than just attention gravitating to certain regions or certain sectors.
That makes sense. You mentioned skills, and I think that's something that comes up very often. How would you categorize skills, or have you seen any, when it comes to skills, if you ask data scientists, for example, in different industries, they talk about different things, they describe their roles differently, and there seems like there's no kind of cohesive communication and language around skills. And if we talk about skills development and getting people to understand the skills that they need to move into AI or to just be productive members in a changing society, I feel like one of the first things we need to address is the communication around skills and make sure that everyone understands what skills, how do we talk about skills, what are skills, what aren't skills, what's the difference between skills and knowledge and things like that. Have you seen, is that a topic that comes up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the terminology and the language, I think, is something in AI generally that is a bit of a problem, because I mean, AI as a term, you could question how useful it is. We use it, but really we're talking about a number of different technologies, and that in itself, I think, isn't always especially helpful, because then people have their own kind of interpretation of what they're talking about before you've even started. Sure. So yes, I agree in the skills space.
That's very interesting. I suppose, again, we talk a lot about AI and how different people understand AI. From your perspective, when you mentioned that you hear about the benefits of AI every day, and there's new things that are popping up left and right, how do you distinguish between hype and real opportunity?
That's a good question. I mean, yes. So lots of things come in and lots of things get badged AI, and I have things come into my inbox, and when you read the detail, they're not AI, and I feel like I could have saved sort of 15 minutes of my time from reading something that I didn't need to read. I think it's really about kind of, understanding or getting sort of enough detail, and I think that that's where sometimes it's a bit of a challenge. Like, when we're funding programs, sometimes we get sent a summary description, like the public description that goes into the domain. And obviously companies don't put a huge amount of the technical detail in that because it's in the public domain. And so we get asked to kind of look at that and comment, but you don't have enough information to be able to say this is hype or this is not hype. I think it's around just being able to kind of get access to just more detail. So being able to actually speak to the people involved in projects is normally the most helpful way. I mean, invariably, when things are coming into some of our more open competitions, they're going for assessment. They're being assessed by independent experts. So that's not something we tend to get involved with. So we trust that the assessors that we've brought on board have that expertise to be able to say, what they're talking about here is kind of bending the realms of, or there's not sufficient detail, because that's the other thing. It's like we need to be able to kind of understand what the company's looking to do to be able to assess whether we think that there's that kind of economic, societal benefit that will come out of the other end. So I think, often if people are hyping things up, it tends to fall down a bit when we start to look at the kind of, the business case and what they're actually looking to do. So I think it probably comes out in the wash later on.
Yeah, and I think also it's interesting because people sometimes forget and they think they can make big claims with AI, but they forget that fundamentally, to be able to apply AI to something, a human needs to be able to do it themselves. And only then can you then apply AI, train it, learn from the human, and then just essentially do it much faster and with a much higher level of precision in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think, is exactly what, the problem is when you don't have enough awareness generally in society. So I think the more we can get people kind of having that kind of basic awareness, that stops some of this, because, I have a lot of friends or people come to me, like, when we're down the pub, and they'll ask me like whether they've heard something and what's the basis of that. And obviously, I can sort of say, well, in everything that I see from InnovateUK, the innovators that they're working on, for everything I see from the academic base, there's not, unless they've got some really impressive IP behind closed doors that, no one in the world knows about yet, it's very unlikely that that's happening. So yeah, it's but not everyone has kind of access to someone that has the expertise to kind of quash some of those the hype and those claims. So I think, for me, I really want to see kind of more increased awareness sort of generally.
Just a quick follow-up on that. What do you think about ChatGPT? Have you used it personally?
I haven't used it personally. I think it could have benefits. I think it's very early days. It's produced some interesting outputs, but I think it's also produced some, wildly off the mark outputs. So, it's very early days for the technology. I don't think it's threatening companies that have maybe gone down the route of employing sort of more standard conversational AI chatbot techniques at the minute. I think that's where we're staying at for a little while in that sort of space. But I think it's very exciting. I think that generative AI generally is very exciting, and certainly on the kind of the chatbot side of things, I think there's real commercial value in that, and there's real opportunities for that. Maybe more so than the sort of the visual generative AI. I think once it's it's at a maturity that it's kind of reliable for a business to use, I think it will be very powerful.
Yeah, I think another characteristic about these models is that they also kind of improve exponentially, and particularly with ChatGPT, because it's released out to the public, there's a lot of quick iteration that's happening, and I've personally seen some significant improvements since the initial launch. And I think they had an update on the 9th of January, and it seems like the quality is starting to improve. That being said, it's still, if you ask it to explain the benefits of eating grass or rocks, it's still going to give you a very compelling argument for why you should eat rocks.
And I guess that's the thing, like it's great for this kind of experimentation and research, and that's fantastic. I guess it's just that reliability for, to put that in a business context. It's a model that you don't have visibility of. You don't really have visibility of the data that's trained it. And so having the confidence that it's going to give you the results you want every time, and you're not even once it gets to a point where it's performing well enough, then how does it drift away from that over time? I think that's where I feel businesses would have to be very cautious about using something like that. We've seen it before with other data sets like ImageNet, where people were using that very much as a benchmark to train their algorithms and test their algorithms, but actually what was the data going into that, and some of the labeling of that data was, hugely offensive. And so I think there needs to be a caution from an industry perspective about some of these, using some of these models where you're not in control of the development of them, and for reputational reasons.
Absolutely, yeah. And probably one of the main reasons of the hype of ChatGPT, I think, is also it just made it easier for anyone to actually interact with AI, whereas before you would need to have some level of understanding around prompt engineering to be able to actually just get potentially similar results.
And I think that's the thing. I think we absolutely, like, the technologies that we have now, like that shows the kind of where we need to be getting to, because I think there's definitely a need to kind of evolve from what we do have, both on that sort of, like you were saying, the human, I guess the human interface into some of these technologies, so people can work alongside them more easily. But I think also in kind of areas like, sort of making them more lower power computing, because, with the environmental concerns around it, I think we need to move away from some of that, and also how we kind of deal with data. So being able to use smaller data sets, it kind of plays into that low power mode, but also and addresses some of the climate concerns that we might have about some of the technologies, but also it's going to help us with use the technologies for more things. So actually, how can we predict like rare events? So particularly on, like, if it's rare diseases and stuff like that. So I think there's absolutely evolution that needs to happen with some of the technologies, and if we have that, it's going to be even more powerful. Obviously that takes time, it takes research, it takes investment. But I think those are kind of some of the next sort of areas I think that we'll see as kind of priorities, as AI that can kind of span multiple tasks. It can deal with smaller amounts of data. It can deal with data from different, different types of data at the same time, and has that kind of lower energy consumption. I think will be really powerful.
Perfect. Well, Sarah, thanks a lot for your time. Is there anything you'd like to promote or shout out before we call this off?
So I think just for me, we have the, obviously, if there are any AI developers listening, we have the call out at the minute that closes on the 25th of January, all about developing, as I was saying before, sort of tooling to address some of the bottlenecks that in the AI development process. And we've got other funding calls, so if that one's not suitable, there's lots of other opportunities. So the best advice is just to always keep checking our website, because new things get added all the time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your time. This was a very interesting conversation.
No problem.